5 hours behind Kremlin doors, and nothing. Putin, Trump's envoys, and a peace deal that simply refused to be born. As territorial demands harden, Europe bristles, and Black Sea threats spiral. The gap between Washington and Moscow widens into a chasm. Tonight, failed talks, fresh warnings, and a continent inching closer to a conflict no one claims to want. But everyone fears. Five hours of negotiations between Russian President Vladimir Putin and American envoys in the Kremlin have ended without achieving a breakthrough on a Ukraine peace deal. US President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and son-in-law Jared Kushner met Putin on December 2nd in talks that Kremlin foreign policy advisor Yuri Ushakov described as constructive but inconclusive.
Беседа была весьма полезной.
The conversation between Putin, Witkoff, and Kushner was very useful, constructive, and very meaningful. It lasted not for 5 minutes, but for 5 hours. We could agree with certain things, and President Putin confirmed this to his interlocutors. We criticized some things, and the president did not hide our critical, even negative attitude to a number of proposals.
According to CNN, territorial disputes remained amongst the most contentious issues, with the Kremlin maintaining its demands for Ukraine to abandon NATO membership aspirations and cede control of annexed eastern territories. The White House had expressed optimism ahead of the meeting, though no direct Putin-Trump summit has been scheduled. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he was awaiting signals from the American delegation before deciding whether to dispatch higher-level negotiators. The talks followed November 30th discussions in Miami between US officials and Ukrainian representatives that Secretary of State Marco Rubio termed productive, though substantial work remains outstanding. Hours before the Kremlin meeting, Putin delivered a provocative message to European nations, dismissing what he termed their fantasy of inflicting strategic defeat on Russia. The Russian president accused European leaders of attempting to derail American peace efforts by proposing terms Moscow considers unacceptable, claiming they had sidelined themselves from negotiations by severing diplomatic contacts with Russia.
We are not planning to fight Europe. I have said this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly decides to wage war against us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The question is, if Europe starts a war with us, I believe that very quickly, this is not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we act in a surgical, careful way, you understand, right? It is not war in the full, modern sense of the word. If Europe chooses to start a war, the situation can very quickly reach a point where there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
The comments came as German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius recently suggested direct Russia-NATO confrontation could occur by 2028, whilst France has floated deploying NATO troops to Ukraine. European Union officials have criticised the American peace proposal as favouring Moscow, with Brussels unveiling its own €800 billion Rearm Europe plan, and NATO members pledging to raise defence spending to 5% of GDP. Putin also warned Moscow could target vessels from countries supporting Ukraine following attacks on Russia-linked tankers in the Black Sea. The Russian president characterized recent strikes on tankers as piracy, threatening first to expand attacks on Ukrainian ports before potentially retaliating against ships from nations backing Kyiv. He raised the prospect of cutting Ukraine off from the sea entirely.
The most radical option is to cut Ukraine off from the sea. Then piracy will be impossible in principle.
The warnings followed near-simultaneous attacks on 2 sanctioned tankers off Turkey's coast. A Ukrainian security source claimed responsibility, stating the vessels were helping Moscow evade international sanctions whilst potentially carrying $70 million worth of oil. December 2nd saw another incident involving a Russian-flagged tanker carrying sunflower oil that was attacked by a drone near Turkish waters. Ukraine firmly denied involvement, with Foreign Ministry spokesman Hiori Taiki suggesting Russia may have staged the incident as a false flag operation. The attacks have disrupted Russian oil shipments, with at least one shipping manager reportedly ceasing Russian routes amid security concerns. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte described the incidents as further evidence of security risks posed by Russia's Ukraine invasion.